Hello, today I'll be talking about a topic that has become almost mythic in modern everyday astrology, Mercury Retrograde. For many people, it is blamed for everything from missed emails and technology failures to travel delays and mixed up plans. In astrology, Mercury governs communication, travel, and information, so when it appears to move backward in the sky, it signals a time to slow down, double-check details, rethink our approach, or does it? So I'm going to dig a little deeper into this topic and explore some of the meanings behind it. First, a little technical context. Now, traditional astrologers measured planetary strength using two main tools, essential and accidental dignity. Now, essential dignity is about a planet's natural power by sign. For example, Mercury in Virgo, where it rules and is considered to be exalted by most, but not by everyone, is considered to be very strong. Now, accidental dignity, however, is based on the planet's situation in the chart, house position, motion, speed, combustion, aspects to other planets, and of course, retrograde motion. So this is where Mercury retrograde becomes relevant. It was treated as a concrete ability, basically a mark of altered or diminished functionality. Ptolemy explained retrograde motion as an illusion caused by Earth's perspective. It only looks like the planet is moving backward. Later astrologers like Dorotheus of Sidon warned that if a planet ruling a part of life is retrograde, things in that area might be delayed or disrupted. Arabic astrologers Mashallah and Abu Mashar also cautioned against starting important things like contracts or travel when Mercury is retrograde due to the potential for confusion. In medieval astrology, Abraham ibn Ezra, writing in 12th century Spain, described retrograde planets as generally weakened, but he also acknowledged that they could retain power under certain conditions. In the beginning of Wisdom, one of the most important of the basic medieval text of astrology, he notes that if a retrograde planet is in its own sign or exaltation, and especially if placed in an angular house like the 1st or 10th, it may still signify strength, especially in mental or intellectual matters. So, for example, a retrograde Mercury in Gemini or Virgo placed in an angular house might not only maintain its influence, but could even reflect a more internalized, thoughtful, or intensified form of mercurial expression. In William Lilly's 17th century system of accidental dignities, a retrograde planet receives -5 points, which is substantial. For context, that's the same debility assigned to a planet that is combust or burned up by proximity to the sun. And you can find more information about this in this book, Christian Astrology. So, retrograde motion was seen as a reversal of normal behavior. A planet that turns backward was interpreted as turning away from its task, hesitating or obstructed, usually more internal, hidden, or confused in its effects. And for Mercury, the planet of speech, reason, commerce, and travel, this was especially significant. When Mercury is retrograde in a traditional framework, its functions are usually described as inward rather than expressive, analytical but anxious, and sometimes prone to forgetfulness, mistakes, or even duplicity, depending on the rest of the chart. Now, William Lilly specifically describes a natal retrograde Mercury individual as someone who may promise and not deliver, speak falsely, sometimes unknowingly, or engage in speech that is confused or regretted later. But, and this is important, if the chart concerns something from the past, Mercury retrograde may be quite appropriate as it represents retrieval, review, and reflection. And these ideas weren't limited to Lilly. In the Renaissance, thinkers like Marsilio Ficino and John Dee, Queen Elizabeth I's astrologer and advisor, saw Mercury as more than just the planet of communication. In their Hermetic worldview, Mercury was a symbol of the in-between, a guide between spirit and matter, reason and imagination. They didn't talk about Mercury retrograde the way we do today, but they did believe in the power of reflection, hidden knowledge, and the messages that come when the outer world goes quiet. So from that perspective, someone born with Mercury retrograde might be seen as a dreamer, a translator of symbols, a healer of knowledge, someone who lives between the lines and helps others make sense of them. In Vedic astrology, planets that appear to move backward in the sky from our earthly perspective are called Vakri Grahas, or retrograde planets. Now, this apparent backward motion happens because of the relative positions and speeds of Earth and the other planets. Now, the cornerstone text of Vedic astrology, the Brihat Parashara Horashastra, written by the sage Parashara, explains that retrograde planets behave differently from those moving forward. Parashara describes retrograde planets as sometimes gaining strength or potency. They're said to produce intensified results, which can be either beneficial or challenging, depending on the planet's sign, house placement, and aspects. For example, planets like Mercury, Venus, Jupiter, and Saturn can be considered stronger or more influential when retrograde. Jupiter retrograde can deepen wisdom, Saturn retrograde may bring serious karmic lessons, and Mercury retrograde can intensify communication or thought processes for better or worse. Now let's see how Mercury retrograde may behave in different houses of a natal chart through a traditional lens. In the first house, it indicates a more inward-thinking person. One may reflect self-questioning or be hesitant in self-expression. So think quiet on the outside, busy on the inside. In the second house, one may rethink or mismanage finances. There can be frequent shifts in values or priorities around material security. But these people are also incredibly resourceful. Their wealth grows in reflection, not speed. In the third house, Mercury retrograde shows possible miscommunication with siblings, early learning delays, or over-processing information. But this is a strong position for introspection and study. These people are writers, readers, and thinkers, but on their own terms. In the fourth house, one's thoughts may turn inward or to the past. A complex relationship with family or home can be seen. Memory can be strong, but selective. In the fifth house, one's creativity may be refined through revision. Romantic communication may be guarded or hesitant. These people usually have a deep personal connection to their writing, acting, or creativity. In the sixth house, it shows possible work errors, document issues, or overly analytical health concerns. Mercury is traditionally weakened here, but these people can also develop systems and rituals that no one else could design. Think mental engineers. In the seventh house, communication in partnerships may be strained or require repetition and clarity. Contracts may be subject to revision, but it also gives the ability to understand others deeply. These people just need time. In the eighth house, possible concerns with hidden finances, shared resources, or even taboo subjects can be seen. The mind is deep but private. These people see what is not being said. Now in the ninth house, here we see mind that questions or reworks beliefs. One may not easily accept dogma. It is good for research or scholarship. Now these individuals speak their own gospel. In the 10th house, Mercury retrograde shows a career involving editing, analysis, revision, or behind-the-scenes strategy. Recognition may come later. Basically, the voice takes longer to be heard, but when it is, it defines public identity. Now, in the 11th house, friendships and long-term goals may be frequently revised. Communication with groups might be misread or delayed. These people can feel like outsiders in groups, but also like visionaries. In the 12th house, thought patterns may work against the self unless consciously redirected. Interest in hidden knowledge is common. Mind is tuned into the invisible realms, but these people need silence and solitude to hear that mind voice clearly. Now in signs. Now think of each sign as a flavor, a tone of voice Mercury wears while doing its job. So thinking, speaking, writing, and observing. In Gemini or Virgo, which are Mercury's home signs, retrograde doesn't weaken it. Actually, it can turn the mind inward, making someone precise, detail-obsessed, curious, but may be prone to overthinking. These are the people who edit a text message 5 times before deleting it entirely. Now, I will add Aquarius here too. If you know, you know. If you don't, please ask in the comment section below. Now, these signs, they don't just communicate. They study the art of it. They revise, refine, research. These are deep thinkers, strong writers, and sometimes very shy speakers. Now, Mercury retrograde in Aquarius thinks in networks, in patterns, preferring writing or coding their ideas rather than shouting them. These people may have strong speech patterns, but that's because they're ahead of their time, or maybe not. Most likely, these are the weirdos who end up being right. In Aries, Mercury retrograde can make a person blunt in speech, but also strategic. These people speak when it counts. Their thoughts come in bursts, but with edge. It can indicate someone who struggles with impulsivity, but has a sharp mental sword once they master it. Now in Taurus, things slow down. Mercury becomes sensual, it listens more than it speaks. In retrograde, this can make for quiet observers, lovers of poetry, people who write or speak in rhythms. Their minds are gardens, not racetracks. In Cancer, Mercury retrograde becomes emotional memory. People here may not say much out loud, but they remember everything. Words carry weight and tone matters. They're intuitive, sometimes psychic, and they often communicate best through storytelling, art, or song. In Leo, Mercury retrograde can create performers who take time to find their voice. These are people with brilliant minds, but they may doubt themselves early on. But once they open up, they roar. There's often a flair for drama, for teaching, and for leading with words. In Scorpio, Mercury retrograde creates detectives of the soul. They read between the lines, they know when someone is lying. These are minds that don't stop digging. And sometimes it is hard for them to share what they know because it goes so deep. But they're alchemists of thought. In Pisces, Mercury retrograde makes dreamers. Poets, people who speak in images, metaphors, symbols. Sometimes they feel misunderstood, but their minds are tuned into frequencies others miss. They are translators of the unseen. In Libra, Mercury wants to create harmony with words. Retrograde, well, that's the diplomat who doesn't always say what they mean right away. Their minds are always weighing both sides, and sometimes too much. They may struggle with indecision, with saying no, with finding their own voice in the middle of everyone else's. But when they do speak up, it is graceful and persuasive. A Sagittarius wants to think big, global, cosmic, unfiltered. Now, Mercury here in retrograde can create people who are on a lifelong search for truth. They may have strong beliefs and then change them completely, again and again. They're explorers of thought. Now, retrograde gives them a mind that never stops asking questions, and sometimes they find answer no one else is willing to look for. A Capricorn is structured, grounded, and disciplined. So Mercury retrograde here can look like someone who takes their time to speak or form ideas. These are the planners, the strategists, the people who might doubt themselves early in life, but become authorities in what they do later on. Their words may feel cold at times, but they're careful and real. Now, how does Mercury retrograde behave when conjoined with other planets? With the Sun, probably combust, Mercury's voice is weakened, especially in public matters. However, if Cazimi, so within 17 arc minutes, it gains exceptional clarity and insight, even when retrograde. If with Venus, this can soften Mercury's tone, may indicate a romantic writer or someone with a talent for artistic revision or charming rhetoric, though still somewhat inward or slow to express. With Mars, this can indicate a sharp tongue, aggressive speech, or writing critiques or exposés. When retrograde, that edge may turn inward, leading to self-criticism or anxiety. With Jupiter, Mercury retrograde may point to philosophical or spiritual revisions. The person may rethink beliefs or become an excellent researcher or translator of large concepts. Now with Saturn, this usually indicates serious, methodical thought, but possibly fearful expression, mental blockages, or delayed learning. A retrograde Mercury with Saturn can be brilliant, but slow and somber. And with the Moon, retrograde Mercury has a powerful influence on memory and emotion in thinking. Retrograde can make this a person who replays conversations endlessly or doubts emotional intuition. And what happens when retrograde Mercury is in hard or soft aspect with the traditional malefics, Saturn and Mars? Well, traditional astrologers believe that trines and sextiles mitigate the more destructive tendencies of malefics, especially if the malefic planet is dignified, meaning it's in a sign it rules or exalts. So when retrograde Mercury trines Saturn, it brings disciplined, focused thinking. Mercury may become a methodical analyst, great for research, writing, or slow intellectual mastery. If it trines Mars, it gives assertive but controlled speech. The mind is decisive and sharp, but measured, good for argument, leadership, or decisive planning. This combination might suit a debater, surgeon, tactician, or activist, especially one working to revise or challenge existing systems. Now, if it squares opposition or sometimes conjunction Saturn, this may bring rigid thinking, fear of speaking, or internalized doubt. One may censor themselves, delay decisions, or struggle with pessimism. If the same happens with Mars, this may signal verbal aggression, mental impulsivity, rash decisions, and a sharp tongue or combative communication style may emerge. Now, I'd like to take a moment to give a clarification about my own approach. While I do find it valuable to understand the history and symbolism of Mercury retrograde, and I've seen some interesting manifestations of it, I want to be clear. In my own practice, I do not emphasize Mercury retrograde at all as a determining factor in natal chart work or any other retrograde planet. And here is why. Now, Mercury retrograde occurs about 3 times a year, lasting roughly 3 weeks each time. So, from a purely mathematical standpoint, Mercury is retrograde about 19, 20 or more % of the time. That means it's actually pretty common, not rare at all. And when you look at the data, there is no consistent evidence linking Mercury retrograde to things like mental instability, miscommunication, or any failure. People born with Mercury retrograde don't seem to have more difficulties than anyone else. And this is why context matters way more than just one condition. In astrology, we have to look at the whole picture. The planet's sign, its house, the aspects it makes, its dignity, the sect it belongs to. All of these details and much more shape what it really means. Retrograde motion on its own is never a final answer. It's just one piece of a much bigger puzzle. Now that brings me to Michel Gauquelin, a 20th century French statistician whose work I find interesting and like. He tested astrology against huge amounts of data. Now he did find some interesting things like the famous Mars effect, where Mars showed up more often in the charts of athletes. But he didn't find support for many common ideas in astrology, including the usual interpretations of zodiac signs, aspects, or retrograde motion. Now, Gauquelin's research and work is good, and it basically tells us to ground astrology in experience, observation, and humility, not superstition. Now, the real question we should ask is, does this pattern show up consistently in people's lives? And are we honoring the symbol or just fearing it without reason? So to wrap this up, yes, Mercury retrograde has a long history in astrology, and yes, it was taken seriously by traditional astrologers and usually treated as a debility. But it is not a cosmic disaster. In natal work, like we heard, it can be a sign of internalized communication, reflective intelligence, or even creative revision. And sometimes it's just Mercury being Mercury. I don't treat it as a defining factor in my analysis, but I do believe it deserves understanding, clarity, and context. I acknowledge that Mercury retrograde may influence timing, style, and inner processing for some people, but I don't consider it a universal affliction, nor do I use it to define a person's intelligence, coherence, or potential. But because so many people believe that Mercury retrograde affects them and often worry about it, I felt I can make this video to explain what it means, how it was historically seen, and where the limits of that meaning begin. As always, astrology invites both precision and poetry, and the deeper we study, the more nuanced our understanding becomes. Mercury retrograde is just rewinding the story until it is told right. Thank you for spending time with me today and for going deeper into the tradition where things are always more layered than they first appear. If you're curious about how Mercury retrograde might be influencing your own chart or life, feel free to ask in the comment section below. Also, please subscribe and press a like button, and I'll see you next week. Bye!